Alicia had always started her mornings early, long before the city stirred to life. Her car dealership, once a small lot with just a handful of vehicles, had grown into one of the most respected dealerships in the neighborhood. She had worked hard for years, learning the ins and outs of the business, building relationships with suppliers, mentoring employees, and making sure her customers always felt valued. Today seemed like any other day. The sun was barely up, and the smell of fresh coffee filled her office as she organized the day's schedule and prepared to greet the first customers. As Alicia was reviewing inventory records, she noticed two men in police uniforms walking slowly across the lot. Their eyes were scanning the cars and the building with a kind of suspicion that immediately made her uneasy. She had dealt with a variety of people over the years, but the feeling that something was off hit her right away. Alicia walked outside to meet them, her calm demeanor masking the tension she felt inside. "Good morning," she said politely, trying to make the interaction smooth. "Can I help you?" The officers ignored the greeting and got straight to the point. They asked if she was the person in charge of the dealership. Alicia confirmed that she was the owner, pointing toward her name on the office door and the signage outside. One officer squinted at her and asked for her ID. She handed it over without hesitation, thinking this would clear up any misunderstanding. But instead of easing the tension, their expressions hardened. The first officer said they had received reports of a suspicious person at the dealership and needed to ask a few questions. Alicia frowned in confusion. Suspicious person? That was her. She had been running the place for years. She asked them politely to clarify, explaining she was the owner and had all the documentation to prove it. The officers, however, seemed uninterested in listening. One of them leaned slightly closer and asked, almost accusingly, why she was here at the dealership. Alicia took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "I own this business," she said steadily. "I have all the proper licenses and paperwork. I'm here every day to manage it." She gestured to the employees and the customers who were starting to notice the interaction. "My staff and these customers can confirm that I am the owner." Despite her explanation, the officers continued to press the matter, speaking over her and ignoring her documentation. Alicia felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice calm and steady. She had always believed in handling conflict with patience and clarity. She knew that getting angry could escalate the situation unnecessarily. But she also knew that ignoring their bias was dangerous. Meanwhile, some of her employees had come outside to see what was happening. They were equally shocked, knowing that Alicia was indeed the owner and wondering why the police were acting this way. One of them, a young man named Terrence, tried to step forward and explain. Officer 1 waved him off, telling him to step back even though Alicia nodded for him to stay close. Alicia tried again to reason with them. "You can check with my accountant," she said. "My employees, the city records. Everything proves I own this business. I'm not here as a visitor or a customer. I'm the owner." She held out the paperwork she had in her hands, hoping that the evidence would be enough to stop this. But the officers seemed determined. One of them muttered something under his breath, clearly dismissive. Alicia felt a wave of frustration but did not let it show. She knew she needed to remain composed, not just for herself but for the customers who were watching. She did not want anyone to feel unsafe or intimidated because of what was happening. Then suddenly one officer told her to step outside. Alicia raised an eyebrow, asking why. She was already outside, she explained calmly. "No," he said. "Step further now." She complied, walking carefully, her hands visible. Her mind raced. She had seen enough situations where people were mistreated, and she refused to be a victim. But she also knew the importance of staying calm and measured, of not giving them an excuse to escalate. Once a few steps away from the office, the officer demanded that she provide more identification. Alicia handed it over again, repeating her explanation. "I am the owner. You are looking at the wrong person if you think otherwise." One of the officers laughed softly, a sound that made Alicia's stomach tighten. It was a laugh that carried judgment, as if they were certain that she did not belong in the position she held. The tension in the air was thick. Some customers whispered among themselves, and a few tried to get a closer look. One elderly woman who had been coming to the dealership for years muttered, "This is unbelievable." Another young man who was shopping for a car looked visibly upset and took out his phone, apparently ready to record the situation. Alicia realized quickly that she needed evidence. She opened her phone and started recording the interaction, making sure the conversation was documented. She hoped that the recording would serve as proof of the unfair treatment she was receiving. Meanwhile, the officers continued to insist she needed to leave the premises for further questioning. Alicia refused, explaining that she was on her own property. One officer replied sharply, saying that refusing to leave counted as resisting authority. Her employees tried to intervene again. Terrence and another staff member explained firmly that Alicia was the owner, showing their own ID badges to vouch for her. Customers began to murmur, some shaking their heads, others speaking up in support. The officer who had been dismissive before now seemed slightly uncomfortable, but still insisted on following protocol. Alicia could see that their confidence was wavering, but they were determined not to lose face. Then, without further warning, one officer grabbed her arm roughly and began attempting to handcuff her. Alicia flinched at the sudden aggression but remained calm verbally. She asked repeatedly for the reason, stating that she had done nothing wrong. The other officer stood close, watching, and Alicia could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But the situation had already escalated to a point where retreat seemed impossible. People in the dealership lot were now openly recording, and some were calling friends or family to witness what was happening. Alicia's employees stood near her, quietly but firmly, showing that they supported her. Some of the customers tried to speak up, asking the officers to reconsider, but the officers ignored them, focused only on enforcing their mistaken authority. Despite the chaos, Alicia did not panic. She focused on her breathing, keeping her voice clear and steady as she asked for the officer's name and badge number. This was not just about this moment, she told herself internally. This was about protecting her business, her reputation, and setting an example that she would not be intimidated or silenced. The first officer muttered something again, shaking his head, while the second officer finally glanced at her identification and documents more carefully. But instead of apologizing, they doubled down, saying she was being uncooperative. Alicia could feel a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling inside her, but she pushed it down. She needed to stay composed for herself and for everyone watching. Alicia continued to explain calmly, repeating that she owned the dealership, pointing to her name on the office and showing the necessary legal documents. Her voice was steady, but her mind was racing, thinking about the possible consequences. She could not believe that in 2025, a black woman could be treated this way on her own property. It felt surreal, yet it was happening in real time. Her employees tried to calm the customers and assure them that Alicia was fine, that they were witnessing an injustice. Some customers offered words of support, while others recorded every moment, knowing that evidence could be crucial. Alicia felt a mix of pride and frustration. She was proud of how her team stayed united, but frustrated at the blatant prejudice she faced. After several tense minutes, the officers decided to take further action. Alicia braced herself, still calm on the outside, her mind preparing for the next steps. She had always known that owning a business as a black woman came with challenges, but nothing like this. She reminded herself to stay strong, to document everything and to protect her rights. She would not let their bias define her or harm her business. The situation had escalated quickly, and Alicia could see that this was more than a misunderstanding. It was a clear example of prejudice in action, yet she stayed composed, determined to face it with dignity and courage, knowing that the truth was on her side. The first moments of confrontation had set the stage for a battle that was about to unfold, one that would test her patience, her resolve, and her ability to remain composed in the face of injustice. Alicia felt her hands tighten slightly as the officer's grip on her arm became firmer. She refused to panic, even though her heart was pounding. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, the air thick with tension. Customers and employees were watching closely, their faces reflecting a mix of anger, concern, and disbelief. Alicia knew that this was no longer just about her. It was about the injustice they were witnessing and the courage it would take to confront it. The officers began to speak louder, repeating accusations that she was being uncooperative and that she needed to leave the property immediately. Alicia calmly reminded them that she owned the dealership. She asked them if they had verified her documents, pointing to her ID, the business license, and the other official papers in her hand. One officer glanced briefly at them but waved it off, saying they needed to do their own investigation first. The tone in his voice suggested that her explanations meant little to them because of the way she looked. Alicia's employees moved closer to her side. Terrence and a few others were careful not to obstruct, but their expressions clearly showed support. They knew Alicia had built this business with integrity, and they could not understand why the police were acting this way. One of the staff whispered to another, wondering if the officers would really have the audacity to arrest the owner of a thriving local business. Alicia overheard them and felt a surge of gratitude for their loyalty. The first officer, clearly frustrated, raised his voice and said that if she did not comply, they would have to take further action. Alicia did not respond with anger. Instead, she focused on keeping her voice calm, measured, and clear. She knew that showing fear or frustration could be used against her. She explained again that she had done nothing wrong and that arresting her would be a mistake. She asked them politely to consider the evidence she had shown them. Despite her calm explanation, the officer signaled to his partner. The second officer stepped forward, and together they tried to force her into a more restricted area, away from her employees and the customers. Alicia resisted gently, trying to maintain her balance and dignity while keeping her words polite but firm. "I am the owner of this business," she said again. "You are making a mistake by treating me this way. My employees and these customers can confirm that I have every right to be here." One of the officers muttered something under his breath, clearly uncomfortable now, but he said nothing aloud. Alicia noticed it and felt a small sense of relief, though she remained cautious. She continued recording the interaction on her phone, holding it up discreetly. She knew that having video evidence could make a significant difference later. Every word, every action needed to be documented. Customers began speaking up. A young woman who had come to look at a car said firmly, "This is ridiculous. She is the owner." Another man standing near the entrance tried to get the officers to stop, stating that Alicia had done nothing wrong. The officers, however, seemed determined to assert control, ignoring the growing crowd and the murmurs of disapproval. Alicia knew that the situation could escalate further at any moment. The first officer, now visibly annoyed, tried to justify their actions. They claimed that there had been a complaint about suspicious activity at the dealership. Alicia asked calmly to see the report, saying that without evidence, their accusations were baseless. One officer hesitated, flipping through his notebook, but he did not provide any proof. The absurdity of the situation made Alicia's chest tighten. She had worked so hard to earn her position and reputation, and here she was being treated like a criminal in front of everyone. Her employees tried to calm the customers and prevent them from intervening physically. Terrence held up his hands and told the crowd to stay back while quietly whispering to Alicia, "Let's keep it calm. We have your back." Alicia nodded slightly, appreciating his words. She needed to stay composed, not just for herself, but for her staff and the customers who were now watching with a mix of fear and anger. As the tension continued, Alicia realized that she needed to protect herself legally as well. She asked the officers for their names and badge numbers, explaining that she would need them for any formal complaint or report she might have to file. The officers were reluctant, but one eventually muttered their information. Alicia repeated it aloud, recording it on her phone to ensure that everything was documented accurately. Suddenly, one of the officers stepped forward and grabbed her wrist, attempting to handcuff her. Alicia flinched at the rough movement but did not resist violently. She kept her body calm, her voice steady as she said, "I am asking you again to verify my ownership and my legal rights. You are making a mistake." The officer seemed to hesitate for a moment, glancing at his partner. Alicia sensed a brief flicker of doubt, but knew the situation was far from over. The other officer approached and spoke in a slightly quieter tone, suggesting they could resolve the situation without further conflict. Alicia nodded slightly, appreciating the momentary pause. She continued explaining that she had done nothing wrong and that the allegations were baseless. Her employees moved slightly closer, forming a protective barrier without being aggressive. Customers began recording on their phones, and a few made calls to friends or family to alert them about what was happening. Alicia's mind was racing. She had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. It was not just about the business anymore. It was about confronting systemic bias and protecting her dignity. She reminded herself to stay calm, to speak clearly, and to keep recording everything. This was not only about the immediate situation but about making sure the truth was documented for the long term. The officers continued to argue among themselves quietly, occasionally glancing at Alicia and her employees. She could sense that their confidence was wavering slightly, but they were still determined to assert authority. Alicia used this moment to maintain her composure, repeating her statements about ownership, legal documentation, and the rights she had on her property. She spoke firmly but politely, ensuring that anyone watching could see her integrity and calm under pressure. Terrence whispered to Alicia that they were all ready to support her in any way, whether by providing witness statements or helping with documentation. Alicia nodded, grateful for the loyalty and courage of her team. She knew that facing the officers alone would have been overwhelming, but with the support around her, she felt stronger and more prepared to handle whatever came next. The officers made one last attempt to pressure her to leave the premises. Alicia stood her ground, her eyes calm but resolute. She explained once again that she was the owner, that she had the legal right to be on the property, and that she had done nothing wrong. She reminded them that escalating the situation would only reflect poorly on their conduct and could have legal consequences. Time seemed to stretch on as the standoff continued. Customers and employees remained quietly supportive, some recording, some just watching intently. Alicia focused on controlling her breathing, maintaining her calm and speaking clearly. She knew that this was a moment that required not just patience but also strategy. Every word, every movement mattered. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the officers signaled to each other. Alicia felt a slight shift in the atmosphere, sensing that they were reconsidering their approach. She kept speaking calmly, continuing to provide evidence of her ownership and explaining that arresting her would be a mistake. She remained polite but firm, ensuring that the message was clear. Although the tension was still present, Alicia knew she had taken important steps. She had maintained her dignity, documented the interaction, and relied on the support of her employees and the community. She felt a small sense of relief knowing that her calm approach and preparation were making a difference. Yet she also knew that the situation was far from resolved and that the next moments would determine how this confrontation would end. She braced herself, ready to face whatever came next with courage, clarity, and unwavering confidence. The tension in the dealership lot continued to build as Alicia and the officers faced off. Customers watched silently, some recording on their phones, others simply trying to process what they were witnessing. Alicia's employees stayed close, offering quiet support while ensuring the officers could not accuse them of interfering. The scene was surreal. She had spent years building her business, and now she was being treated like a criminal on her own property. Alicia continued to speak calmly and clearly, explaining her ownership and showing her documentation once more. The officers seemed to be growing increasingly frustrated, muttering to each other and casting glances at her employees. Alicia remained composed, knowing that any display of anger or panic could worsen the situation. She focused on the evidence and the truth, making sure her words were precise and her tone steady. A small crowd had gathered outside the dealership, drawn by the unusual scene. A few customers spoke up, telling the officers that Alicia was the owner, and that they had witnessed her running the business for years. Others quietly recorded everything on their phones, capturing the injustice for later. Alicia appreciated the support, but she knew that the confrontation was far from over. The officers decided to escort Alicia to the police car, claiming it was necessary for further questioning. Alicia complied without resistance, her movements deliberate and controlled. She continued recording on her phone, speaking to the camera in a calm, clear voice. This was not just about the moment. It was about ensuring that the truth was documented and that any false claims could be challenged later. Inside the police car, the officers continued to question her, repeating accusations of suspicious activity and resistance. Alicia calmly reiterated that she was the owner of the dealership, presenting her documentation once again. She explained the growth of her business, her responsibilities as the owner, and her commitment to the community. Her words were measured, respectful, and firm. The officers seemed increasingly uncomfortable. As they reviewed her documents, one of them glanced at his partner, clearly realizing that the situation was not as straightforward as they had assumed. Alicia sensed their hesitation and continued to provide detailed explanations of her ownership, and the legitimacy of her business operations. She spoke with patience, knowing that her composure was her strongest asset in this tense moment. Back at the dealership, Alicia's employees and customers waited anxiously. Terrence and the others kept the scene calm, speaking quietly to the crowd and ensuring that no one interfered physically. They knew that any rash action could escalate the situation further. The customers continued recording, documenting every moment for social media and potential legal evidence. The support was palpable, creating a sense of community and shared concern. As the officers continued their questioning, Alicia remained focused on her rights and the truth. She asked for their names and badge numbers again, calmly explaining that this information was necessary for any formal complaint or report. The officers reluctantly provided the information, and Alicia recorded it carefully. She knew that every detail mattered and that the smallest oversight could weaken her case later. Hours seemed to pass as the confrontation continued. Alicia remained composed, answering every question with clarity and confidence. She did not allow frustration or fear to dictate her behavior. Her focus was on protecting herself, her business, and her employees while ensuring that the truth was accurately documented. The officers eventually realized that their claims were baseless. They had no evidence of wrongdoing, and Alicia's documentation clearly proved her ownership and legitimacy. Despite this, they were reluctant to admit their mistake publicly. Alicia remained calm, knowing that her patience and composure had turned the situation in her favor. Outside the police car, the crowd continued to watch and record. Social media posts began circulating quickly, highlighting the racial bias and mistreatment Alicia had experienced. Local news outlets started reporting on the incident, bringing attention to the injustice and sparking community outrage. Alicia's story became a symbol of resilience and courage in the face of discrimination. After careful review, the officers finally released Alicia without charges. She stepped out of the police car, maintaining her composure despite the tension and anger she felt. She thanked her employees and the supportive customers, acknowledging their loyalty and courage. The incident had been exhausting, but Alicia knew that she had handled it with dignity and strength. Once she returned to the dealership, Alicia held a brief meeting with her employees. She explained the importance of documenting the incident, maintaining professionalism, and supporting each other. She emphasized that this was not just about personal experience, but about standing up against injustice and ensuring that the community remained aware and engaged. The media continued to follow the story, focusing on Alicia's resilience and the unfair treatment she had faced. Interviews and social media posts highlighted her calm composure, her professionalism, and her dedication to her business and community. Alicia became a voice for others who had faced similar bias, encouraging them to document incidents, stay calm, and seek justice through proper channels. In the days following the incident, Alicia reviewed all the recordings, documents, and witness statements. She consulted with her legal team, preparing for potential action against the officers and the Department for Racial Profiling, Harassment, and False Arrest. She was determined to use this experience not only to protect her rights, but also to advocate for change within her community. The support from her employees, customers, and community members was overwhelming. Many shared stories of similar experiences, offering solidarity and encouragement. Alicia used these connections to organize meetings and discussions on racial bias, community rights, and the responsibilities of law enforcement. Her experience became a catalyst for awareness and action. Through it all, Alicia remained focused on her business. She continued to run her dealership efficiently, providing excellent service to customers and mentoring her employees. She refused to let the incident define her or overshadow her accomplishments. Instead, she used it as a source of strength, determination, and motivation to advocate for justice and equality. Alicia's story spread beyond the local community, gaining attention from regional and national media. Her calm, composed, and professional handling of the situation was praised widely. She became a symbol of resilience, proving that even in the face of blatant injustice, dignity, composure, and strategic action could turn a humiliating situation into an empowering one. By the end of the week, Alicia had solidified her plans for legal action and community advocacy. She continued to share her experience with others, ensuring that the incident was not forgotten and that it could serve as a lesson in courage, persistence, and the importance of standing up for one's rights. Her dealership continued to thrive, supported by a loyal community that admired her strength and integrity. After the release from police custody, Alicia returned to her dealership feeling a mix of relief, frustration, and determination. She was deeply aware of how close the situation had come to escalating further. Her employees greeted her with supportive smiles and quiet nods, showing that they were proud of her composure. Even as she settled back into her office, she felt the weight of what had happened pressing on her mind. The confrontation was over for the moment, but the larger battle had only just begun. Alicia began reviewing the recordings she had made, the documents she had presented, and the statements from employees and customers. Every detail mattered. She meticulously cataloged each piece of evidence, knowing that if she pursued legal action, accuracy would be essential. Her lawyers had advised her to prepare carefully, and she took their guidance seriously. She understood that the officer's behavior was not just a personal attack, but a reflection of a systemic issue, and addressing it required both caution and strategy. The media coverage of the incident grew steadily. Local news outlets aired segments on the racial profiling and wrongful arrest Alicia had faced, and her story began to spread across social media. Many were outraged at the blatant bias, while others expressed admiration for her calm and professional handling of the situation. Alicia used this attention not for self-promotion, but as a platform to highlight the broader issues of racial bias in law enforcement. She wanted the story to be about awareness, not just about her own experience. Community members began reaching out, offering support and sharing their own experiences with discrimination and harassment. Alicia listened carefully, recognizing the importance of creating a network of solidarity. She organized a small meeting at her dealership, inviting employees, loyal customers, and community leaders to discuss the incident and brainstorm ways to support Black-owned businesses and advocate for accountability. The meeting was emotional, filled with stories of struggle, hope, and determination. Alicia felt a sense of purpose growing within her, knowing that her experience could help others. The legal team began drafting a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the police department for racial profiling, harassment, and false arrest. Alicia worked closely with them, providing detailed notes, videos, and witness statements. She wanted to ensure that the case was strong and that it would send a clear message, that discrimination and bias would not go unchallenged. Every meeting with her lawyers reinforced her resolve, and she felt empowered knowing that her experience could lead to real change. As she focused on the legal process, Alicia also prioritized maintaining her business operations. She met with her employees to reassure them, emphasizing that their work and dedication were essential to the dealership's success. She encouraged them to continue providing excellent service, despite the distractions of the incident. Alicia's leadership and calm presence helped the team stay motivated and focused, reinforcing the sense of stability and professionalism that had always defined the business. In the following days, Alicia held interviews with journalists who wanted to understand her perspective. She spoke candidly about the unfair treatment she had received, the systemic biases that allowed such situations to occur, and the importance of remaining composed in the face of injustice. Her words resonated with many inspiring conversations about racial equity and the responsibility of law enforcement to treat all individuals fairly and respectfully. Meanwhile, the officers involved in the incident faced internal review within the police department. Alicia was aware that such processes were often slow and bureaucratic, but she remained patient and focused. She knew that accountability might take time, but documenting everything and pursuing the proper channels was crucial. She continued to meet with her legal team regularly, reviewing strategies and preparing for potential court proceedings. Community support continued to grow. Local business owners, neighbors, and customers rallied behind Alicia, expressing their outrage at the injustice and offering assistance in any way they could. Many shared her story on social media, amplifying her voice and highlighting the larger issue of racial bias in professional settings. Alicia was grateful for this support, recognizing that collective action was powerful and necessary to drive change. Alicia also began reaching out to local advocacy organizations, seeking advice and collaboration on initiatives to protect Black business owners from similar incidents. She participated in discussions, workshops, and forums, sharing her experience and learning from others. These interactions reinforced her belief in the importance of community, solidarity, and proactive measures to prevent discrimination. Through all of this, Alicia remained deeply committed to her employees and customers. She continued to mentor her team, providing guidance and encouragement while ensuring that the dealership maintained its high standards. She emphasized the importance of resilience, professionalism, and integrity, showing that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to remain composed and achieve success. The emotional impact of the incident was undeniable. Alicia took time to reflect, acknowledging the fear, anger, and frustration she had experienced. She also recognized the strength and courage she had shown. She documented her reflections, both as a personal record and as part of her preparation for potential legal proceedings. Writing helped her process the emotions and reaffirm her commitment to justice and fairness. Alicia's story continued to attract attention from broader media outlets, including regional and national platforms. Interviews, podcasts, and news features highlighted her resilience, her leadership, and the lessons learned from her experience. Alicia used these opportunities to advocate for systemic change, focusing on education, awareness, and accountability. Her message was clear. Injustice could be confronted with calm, dignity, and strategic action. As the weeks passed, Alicia worked closely with her legal team to finalize the lawsuit. She also continued to engage with the community, participating in meetings, workshops, and events aimed at promoting equality and protecting Black-owned businesses. Her dealership thrived, supported by loyal customers and employees who admired her strength, leadership, and dedication. Alicia's experience became a turning point, not only for her but for the broader community. She demonstrated that even in the face of unfair treatment and discrimination, it was possible to remain composed, assert one's rights, and advocate for meaningful change. Her story inspired others to speak out, document incidents of bias, and take action to ensure accountability. Through it all, Alicia remained focused on the future. She continued to grow her business, mentor her employees, and use her experience to drive positive change. She understood that the incident at the dealership was not an isolated event, but part of a larger struggle for equality and justice. By facing it with courage, clarity, and resilience, she transformed a moment of injustice into an opportunity for empowerment, advocacy, and community impact. In the end, Alicia's strength and determination left a lasting impression. She had confronted bias, maintained her dignity, and used her experience to advocate for others. Her dealership continued to thrive, and her community rallied behind her, inspired by her courage and commitment. The incident, while deeply challenging, became a catalyst for change, proving that even in the face of injustice, resilience, composure, and action could create lasting impact and inspire others to stand up for what is right. Alicia felt a sense of determination as she walked through her dealership that morning. The events of the past weeks had been exhausting emotionally and mentally, but they had also strengthened her resolve. She knew that her story had the power to inspire others and to bring attention to issues of racial bias and injustice. She moved among her employees, greeting them warmly, thanking them for their support, and acknowledging the role each of them played in keeping the business strong. Customers began to arrive, many of them aware of the story through social media and local news. Some stopped to offer words of support, shaking her hand or leaving notes of encouragement. Alicia responded with calm gratitude, keeping her focus on the business and the people around her. She understood that every interaction, no matter how small, contributed to rebuilding confidence and reinforcing a sense of community. The legal process continued, and Alicia worked closely with her attorneys to prepare the civil rights lawsuit. She reviewed documents, discussed strategy, and made sure that every piece of evidence was organized. Her recordings, employee statements, and the documentation of her ownership were all carefully cataloged. Alicia knew that presenting a clear and thorough case was essential to ensuring accountability and justice. Community members reached out to offer their assistance in any way possible. Local business owners, advocacy groups, and residents shared resources, advice, and support. Alicia organized meetings to discuss strategies for protecting Black-owned businesses from discrimination and bias. These gatherings were filled with heartfelt stories, shared struggles, and a collective determination to create positive change. Alicia felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her experience could help others and contribute to a stronger, more aware community. The media attention continued to grow. Alicia participated in interviews, podcasts, and panel discussions, speaking openly about her experience, the lessons learned, and the importance of documenting incidents of racial bias. She emphasized the need for calm, strategic responses and the power of community support. Her words resonated with many, encouraging dialogue and inspiring action. Back at the dealership, Alicia maintained her focus on operations. She met with employees to discuss sales, customer service, and day-to-day management, ensuring that the business continued to run smoothly. She provided guidance and encouragement, modeling the professionalism and composure that had helped her navigate the difficult situation. Her team responded with dedication, motivated by her leadership and example. Alicia also began to engage more actively with advocacy organizations. She attended workshops, seminars, and community forums to share her experience and to learn from others. She worked with legal experts and civil rights advocates to develop strategies for raising awareness and preventing future incidents of bias. Alicia's efforts were deliberate and focused, combining her personal experience with professional expertise to create meaningful impact. The lawsuit progressed, drawing attention to the officer's conduct and the broader issues of racial profiling and bias. Alicia remained composed throughout, attending meetings with her lawyers and reviewing updates with care. She knew that patience and preparation were crucial, and she continued to document everything meticulously. Her attention to detail and commitment to justice inspired confidence among her team and the community. Support from the public remained strong. Many people shared their own stories of discrimination, finding inspiration in Alicia's calm and strategic approach. Local businesses joined in solidarity, highlighting the importance of standing together against injustice. Social media posts, news articles, and community discussions amplified Alicia's message, creating momentum for awareness and change. Through it all, Alicia remained deeply connected to her employees. She emphasized the importance of teamwork, resilience, and integrity. She encouraged them to stay focused on their work, reminding them that professionalism and dedication were powerful tools in the face of adversity. Her guidance helped the team maintain high standards and a sense of pride in their work. Alicia also took time for reflection. She considered the emotions she had experienced: anger, fear, frustration, and determination, and recognized the growth that had come from facing such a challenging situation. She wrote down her thoughts, documenting her journey as both a personal record and a resource for others who might face similar challenges. This reflection reinforced her resolve and clarified her goals moving forward. The dealership continued to thrive, bolstered by loyal customers, community support, and a motivated team. Alicia's reputation as a strong, capable, and principled business owner grew. Her story became an example of resilience, showing how calm composure, clear documentation, and community engagement could transform a negative experience into a source of empowerment and influence. As the lawsuit moved forward, Alicia remained focused on advocacy and education. She spoke at community events, provided guidance to other Black business owners, and collaborated with advocacy groups to promote awareness and accountability. Her experience had become a catalyst for positive change, and she embraced the opportunity to contribute to a broader movement for justice. Through every challenge, Alicia maintained her dignity and professionalism. She understood that her actions not only affected her own life and business, but also had the potential to inspire others. Her calm, thoughtful approach demonstrated that facing injustice with composure, evidence, and strategy could create meaningful impact. In the months that followed, Alicia's influence continued to grow. Her dealership prospered, and her story inspired others to speak out and advocate for their rights. She remained committed to her employees, her customers, and her community, showing that resilience, leadership, and integrity could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. Ultimately, Alicia's experience at the dealership became more than a personal ordeal. It became a lesson in courage, advocacy, and community empowerment. Through determination, careful planning, and unwavering composure, she transformed a moment of injustice into a powerful story of strength and positive change. Her leadership, her commitment to justice, and her